Hello and welcome to churchtherapy.com's pastor training videos. I'm Kristen Kinsevich, licensed mental health counselor on staff at East Coast International Church in Lynn, Massachusetts. Today I'm going to be talking about why church therapy matters. And really this is about having a heart for our churches to welcome everyone, to embrace the broken. One thing I've noticed being in Lynn, and if you don't know anything about this area, Lynn is a community just north of Boston that has been in a socioeconomic kind of depression for a pretty long time. Back in the 30s, the shoe industry was a really big thing here, and so it was really thriving and doing well economically. And then shoes started coming out of New York more, and that shifted, and Lynn lost that industry. And then later on in the 50s and 60s, GE was a big thing here. We have a big plant. Actually, the first jet engine was made in Lynn, Massachusetts. And then that, contracted out and different things happened with that industry. And so again, you had an economic downturn. And really, Lynn has not recovered from that economically since then. There's a whole spiritual history as well. And so there's just a kind of depression here that I think a lot of inner cities find, especially poorer neighborhoods. And so being here, certainly different from a context that I grew up in, which was a little bit more suburban. And I look around me every week at church and I think none of these people would be in the church I grew up in. None of these people are in other churches around America. This is not representative of the church in America. And yet it is representative of the kinds of people that Jesus dealt with on a daily basis. And so that discrepancy worries me for the American church. And I think, okay, what can we do about it? One of the things that I think is common when you're working in a poorer area is that there's going to be a lot more mental health issues. You're going to have a lot more abuse history. I can't even begin to guess abuse history percentage in my church, but it's probably in the 80 to 90% range if I had to guess. Certainly a lot of depression, anxiety, some schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, you name it, it's here. And so basically church therapy kind of really was a response to that because the need was there. We have some mental health resources in our community, but it's not enough. It's never enough because there's always more people who need freedom, who need emotional help. And so the church just needed a staff person who was going to be ready to deal with mental health issues. And so I collaborate with people in our community, psychiatrists and other agencies, to participate in the mental health service industry here in Lynn, Massachusetts. And I think churches really across America can do this. It's not exclusively an inner city problem because there's a lot of hidden, especially depression and anxiety in the suburbs as well. It's just people don't talk about it as much. People are better at covering it. And here there's just a raw honesty. So no one's hiding, no one's pretending. But in the church in America, a lot of people are walking around pretending. Maybe even a lot of pastors and pastors' families are walking around pretending that everything is fine. And church therapy creates a church culture that says we're not going to pretend that everything's fine. We're going to be honest and we're not going to have stigma about that. And we're going to actually walk forward on a journey of healing. A lot of times people worry that, buying into psychology or counseling ideas kind of gives people a pass. Oh, well, they have bipolar disorder, so, they're allowed to do that. And I think that's such a strange way of thinking because no one wants to be stuck in the traps that they're in. No one wants to suffer with symptoms of a mental illness. No one's signing up for that. And so they want help. People want to get better. And we need to see that as an opportunity. Treatment works and treatment can help people get better. Now, I will say that not all clinicians think that way. A lot of clinicians focus on coping only and they kind of see the mental illness and they don't really see a path to recovery. So there is that out there as well. But from where I'm coming from, the church is the place to offer hope and healing. And that goes for mental health issues as well as obviously the spiritual issues. So we really need to be a church that is reaching the marginalized. And when you have a therapist on staff, when you are declaring as a church that you are interested in being available and responsive to mental health needs, you are embracing and accepting broken people. You're saying you belong here. We're not surprised that you're here. We don't have a stigma about you being here. You don't have to look a certain way, dress a certain way. We just accept and love you. And so that really is the culture of church therapy. It's really the heart of what it means. And it's really about being like Jesus. And there's no pat answers here. We're really talking about just pausing and listening. There's a lot of listening that happens in therapy, of course. And that is something that the whole church needs to engage in just as a culture. To not judge, to not say, oh, I'm so frustrated with you. Mental illness is something that is a long haul. It's a long journey that you're going to walk with someone. And so you can't get frustrated when, let's say, someone with bipolar disorder, has a depressive episode, then seems a little better for a while. Maybe they seem kind of on track. And then they swing into a manic episode, or maybe they go back to a depression. A lot of times that's a point of frustration if you're not prepared to walk a whole journey with a person. This doesn't just get better and clear up, but there is wellness that's possible. And when you avoid pat answers, it actually helps. So pat answers are things like, just trust God, cast your cares on Him, and it'll go away. And honestly, that just unfortunately does not work. Certainly, I believe in supernatural healing for all kinds of diseases, cancer, heart disease, mental illness, but those things are not necessarily always the normal way that we're seeing healing happen. I think we should definitely continue to seek that and pray for that, but we also need to be aware of the healing that can take place through therapy and through not just writing someone off. So really think of the word embrace here. What does it mean for your church to embrace someone who is suffering with mental health issues? To not try to fix them, to not get frustrated when it doesn't go away fast enough, to not tell them to trust God more, to not blame them for their own mental illness, but to really say, we're going to walk with you. You can't carry yourself right now, so we're going to walk alongside and carry some of the load for you. We're not going to put expectations on you. We're not going to have you have to look a certain way or be a certain way. We just love you. What would that level of acceptance look like in your church? And really, church therapy matters because this is whole person discipleship. This is about saying we want you to walk forward with Jesus in what that means for you. We don't want to put pressure on that, but we're going to really walk alongside and help you. And discipleship sometimes can get a little boxy in that it fits a certain mold. And if a person isn't at a certain functioning level, then they're not going to succeed at that. So things that, let's say, require perfect attendance. Someone with a mental health issue is probably not going to achieve that. And so then they're going to fall through the cracks if your church is not ready to respond to their actual needs. I've used an example before, I think in one of my blog posts, about how if 20% of the people in your church were in a wheelchair, what kinds of accommodations might you make for them? You would probably build a ramp, make it handicap accessible, make sure that your auditorium was, had wide aisles and things like that. And 1 in every 5 American adults deal with mental health symptoms in a given year. And so that means if your church is truly reaching out and bringing those people to yourself, your percentage would be at least that if it's representative of the community around you, or maybe even higher if you're doing a really good job bringing in people who are hurting and broken into your congregation. And so we have to ask, how do we accommodate those people? How do we make it easier for them to access Christ, to access discipleship, to really belong? It's really hard to belong when you feel like your emotions aren't working right. And so we need to eliminate this idea that there's a second-class Christian out there. A lot of people with mental health issues in the church feel like they're treated like second-class citizens because they can't keep up. And so I would really challenge you to ask yourself some of these questions about your church. How can you reach out to the hurting and broken? How can you accept? How can you accommodate them? How can you focus on wellness with them without giving pat answers? Please check out more on my website, churchtherapy.com. There's a whole lot more for you there. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.